Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, but we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, I mean, there have been all sorts of movements on the negotiations front.
It's getting exhausting,
It's
George.
getting exhausting keeping track
Keeping score.
of everything. So last week, Reuters published um, documents that purported to be the Trump-Witkoff plan, and which entailed U.S. recognition of Russian sovereignty over Crimea, U.S. recognition of de facto Russian control of the four oblasts at the current line of contact, lifting of U.S. sanctions on Russia, but significantly no restrictions on the size of the Ukrainian military and no restrictions on arms flow to Ukraine. And the Europeans and the Ukrainians then put forward their own plan, according at least to Reuters, which was obviously just a non-starter. Essentially security guarantees for Ukraine,
That the
and
United States would back up.
which with United States backup and so on. So that was obviously a non-starter. And then subsequent to that, on Saturday, Trump met for 15 minutes with Zelensky inside St. Peter's Basilica. And then Trump sent out a truth where he didn't actually mention Zelensky's name or say anything about his meeting, but he seemed to uh, express annoyance with Russian President Putin and said, well, maybe Putin is just sort of stringing me along. Maybe he's not serious about peace. Well, in that case, you have to think about secondary sanctions. And of course, the media got very excited. They thought, oh, thank God, at last the spell is broken. Trump has turned on Putin. And so there've been a lot of happy talk that somehow maybe Zelensky during those 15 minutes had managed to get around Trump. But then Trump did something very interesting yesterday, which was on the 100-day anniversary of his rise, of his assumption of the presidency. He gave an interview to ABC News, and then he said something that he hadn't really. I mean, you could say he hinted at it, but he said something that was new and a new concept. And the new concept is that Trump, will have accomplished a great deal in Ukraine if he prevents Russia from taking the whole of Ukraine. That if it weren't for him, winning the 2024 election, so Russia would have taken the whole of Ukraine. So just as he says, if I had won in 2020, there would have been no war. He's said this many, many times. Now this new claim is that that I am preventing Russia from taking the whole of Ukraine. Now, why this is significant is that it's a way of Trump essentially proclaiming victory,
Peace with honor.
while essentially, ending the war on terms that Russia could accept. So let's just go through that quickly through what he actually said during that interview. Um, and here we have, this is ABC News, and then he's asked. He heard Trump repeats, he could be tapping me along a little bit. I would say that he would like to stop the war. And then this ABC guy says, "You believe that?" And Trump says, "If it weren't for me, I think he'd want to take over the whole country. Personally, I always felt so when I left, there wasn't even a chance that this would happen. When Biden got involved, I won't say whether or not he handled it properly, but obviously it wasn't good because the
But I
war
will
started."
say,
But I will say, because the war started. Putin went in, the war started. I believe that Putin wanted to get all of Ukraine once he went in. And I think part of the reason he went in is he saw what happened in Afghanistan, how incompetently Milley and all the other guys handled that. It was one of the greatest embarrassments of our lifetimes, but maybe in the history of our country. So Putin went in. I think Putin wanted all of Ukraine. In other words, he keeps repeating this. So this is not just something that randomly throws it out. He again repeats it. But I think Putin wanted all of Ukraine. And then Trump says, I think if I didn't win the election, he would have gotten all of Ukraine. I think he would have taken all of Ukraine. And then I think his first choice, never with me, he would have never gone in. With this group of losers, he went in, he saw what happened in Afghanistan, he said, wow, this is my chance. Because it was always the apple of his eye. I talked to him, Ukraine was the apple of his eye. I think he wanted the whole country. And then you've said for months that, and because of me, I do believe that, and he's willing to stop the fighting. You think he wants peace? And then Trump says, you think Vladimir Putin wants peace? I think he does, yes. I think he does still. I think because of me, even with the raining missiles, I think he really, his dream was to take over the whole country. I think because of me, he's not going to do that. Do you trust him? And then he repeats, do you trust him? I don't trust you. I don't trust a lot of people. I don't trust you. Look at you. You come all come in all shooting for bear. You're so happy to do the interview. Now, what?
I don't like the question because I don't like the question. I don't like you.
I don't like you, exactly. Now,
so Trump.
But nonetheless, it's a very interesting,
even brilliant, possibly.
Right. Exactly, because it allows him essentially to bring this war to an end, because he can't go on. What he's doing now is, I think, not gonna is simply a non-starter, because I think ultimately Russia will not accept the terms that are being offered. I mean, it's not going to happen. So he's going to have to move quite drastically to make an offer that the Russians could accept. So then he knows he's going to have to answer the question, hey, you betrayed Ukraine, you sold out Ukraine, you betrayed NATO, our greatest ally, our closest friend in all of the world next to Israel, and you sold it out. And then he says, no, I didn't. I saved Ukraine. I didn't betray Ukraine. I saved Ukraine. And that's an argument that he can absolutely present. Of course, everyone will dispute it, and someone will say, "No, I saved it." I mean, and he will go on. He'll say in every interview and at every rally, he said, "I, Donald Trump, saved Ukraine."
I think it makes sense because, let's face it, George, the entire Western stratagem in this proxy war against Russia has been about narrative control. And so the unprovoked invasion, there you go. Ukraine is winning.
Right.
Russia is already lost. Okay. They wanted less NATO. They got more NATO. See, all of these are all narratives to control our perspective and our understanding of it. And Trump, I don't know if this is something he strategized or just popped out of his head. I guess when it comes to Donald Trump, it doesn't make any difference, I suppose.
Right.
But this is along the same lines of narrative control. And objectively speaking, Trump is right. In a way. He's actually right. Now, George and I have spent thousands of hours on this, so I'm not going to repeat what we've said. I don't believe that there was ever any strategy to take over all of Ukraine. It's been, over 3 years, and look where they are. They're still in the Donbass. So I think Trump is on to something here. Because there's a kernel of truth in it. I mean, we could go layer after layer after layer, and we can see that this is kind of a weak argument. But this is maybe the only argument he has left.
But it's a strong argument, because if he says, look, Russia ends up with 20% of Ukraine, um, 80%, you've still got 80%. I saved 80% of Ukraine. And so, oh, well, we could have gone on fighting and so on. But he'll say, you couldn't go on fighting because if we went on fighting, all of Ukraine would be lost. And this is something he did say when he was angry at Zelensky, that if you continue with this war, you're going to lose the whole of your country. So he can say, okay, this is this is the deal. You've lost whatever 20% or 22% or whatever. You've lost that, but you've got you have the rest of it, and people will attack him. But nonetheless, he has an argument. And he said something like this when again, they're always asking him this question: what concessions are you asking from Russia? You're asking, we see you asking concessions from Ukraine. What concessions are you asking from Russia? And he said something like that. Well, they could have taken the whole of the country. They haven't. That's the concession, and that caused outrage. We said, "Oh, that's what kind of a concession is that?" Well, basically, they don't take the whole of the country, but it's a way of ending the war and saying, hey, we've got peace with honor. Russia hasn't taken the whole of the country.
And on top of it, that will be a justification because as far as I know, I've been out of commission for a few days. There's no new appropriation in Congress to fund this conflict. So that's going to be Trump's talking point. Said, look, we don't need to send any more money. My plan is to accept the terms and conditions of what has been presented. He doesn't have to say the Russians, okay,
Right.
but what has been proposed, and the balance of Ukraine will be a sovereign state. That
Right.
is a victory in itself. And again, in a way, he's absolutely right. Now, everybody, let's not fool ourselves here. There's a lot of nuance here. The size of the Ukrainian
Right.
military,
That would have to be
NATO
accepted.
membership. It's a lot more nuance. However, I think this is if it's accidental serendipity, I don't know, because we're dealing with Donald Trump. This is the way out, George.
It is indeed a way out, and I think in the case of Trump, I mean he's talked to Putin. He's obviously talked to Witkoff, who has now had four lengthy conversations with Putin. He could sort of see the outlines of a deal here. That this is the outline of an agreement. Now, as you say, I mean, I think NATO membership that's off the table, so that's not even up for discussion. But the issue of the size of the Ukraine military, I think that's going to be up for discussion, and then of course, sending in arms and so on. That's obviously also going to be up for discussion. But the outline of this is clear. They're not going to bring in British, French, German forces. It's just not going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen. The British,
It's
Keir Starmer
political
said we're not going
theater.
in without an American backstop. There's no American backstop, so the British aren't going to go in. The Germans, there's just no way the Germans are going to agree to go in. So that leaves Macron. Macron's not going to be stupid enough to send in French forces without any backup from anyone. So that's off the table. So they can come up, even with NATO countries, some if they send in some Hungarian soldiers, I think the Russians may well accept that. Send in maybe Turkish forces, Greek or whatever. I mean, just so long as it's not the key NATO powers in being sent there.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, obviously, the Kremlin smells um, success. I don't want. I'm very wary in using the word victory. Okay, because that's not a word that is used here. As I've said repeatedly, what people want here is the conflict to end. Okay, people don't say it's fight to victory. That's not heard here. People don't talk that way. But the fact that Trump is saying this, he wants a way out, and
Right.
I think this will I think this will work. I think he needs to hone this message a whole lot more. We don't know in the St. Peter's Basilica, who would have thought,
Right.
that and then Macron being told to get lost, which I
Right.
love.
Right. That's
But I
right.
mean, I take Trump at his word on this one. I mean, on almost everything else, I don't, and that's a topic for another video. but he definitely wants to get out of this thing here, and he realizes at 100 days he needs wins because he's not getting a whole lot of wins everywhere else,
Right.
and I think
Yeah.
and he can do he can do this. He can do it. One of the things he needs to do is to get everybody involved in this, line them up in the Oval Office and
Yes.
tell everyone, keep your mouth shut.
No,
All of you.
yeah. Well, I
All
think
of you. Keep your mouth shut.
that's right. Keep your mouth shut. But above all, if he says that's the message, he's going to tell
That's the message.
Hexeth, Rubio, Waltz, you ought to go on these TV shows, and when they ask you and tell you, aren't you betraying our closest friend and ally in the world? He says, no, 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 we're saving our closest friend and ally in the world. We're basically saving them from complete destruction. And if it hadn't been for Donald Trump, there would be no Ukraine today. We have done this, and that's a message. Of course, he's going to get attacked for it, but that doesn't matter.
He's
He
going to be
at
attacked
least now
anyway, George.
has a way of presenting it that hey, we have peace with honor.
He's going to be attacked anyway.
Exactly.
It's not part of the calculus. Forget it. Okay. No matter what he does on this. I mean, the infantile nature of people that are against Trump, they're just going to say the opposite that he does. That's not intelligent. It's not. It's so unhelpful. Okay.
Right.
But I think if he sticks to this message and he gets his people to keep their trap shut and keep to the script. Okay. Because that's one thing that he is. Witkoff seems like an interesting guy to me. I'm not gonna dump on him.
Right.
Okay?
That's right.
But I mean, this Kellogg character, Marco Rubio, being the snake in the garden,
That's right.
and all of that.
But Rubio is pretty good at repeating Trump's message. I mean, he's learned his lines. You think this is pretty insincere. I don't believe that you really think this at all. It's completely opposite of what you used to say.
Yeah, but did you? But
He
what is it?
sticks to the line that Trump says.
Old bullshit to replace new bullshit. Okay?
Right. That's right.
He's just repeating. He's just repeating a script. Okay.
Right.
I don't think he has any belief system whatsoever.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so either. But when he comes on, he says absolutely the same thing that Trump was. Yeah, President Trump. He just wants to end this war. The main thing is to end this war, end the killing, and that's of course a major shift in narrative. I mean, it's like, hey, just a few months ago, everyone was talking about Ukraine, whatever Ukraine wants. We're going to do this. We can't possibly let Putin win. So now it's just about we have to end the killing. That's the main priority. We just got to end the killing. So that's already a major move. And now you just have to make the next step, which is say, yeah, but if it weren't for us, Putin would have taken the whole pie.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing, a derivative of this message, it's going to be very interesting to watch. And because no one wants to admit that they have to eat crow or have egg on their face. But the more I think about this change in messaging, which doesn't have to have anything to do with reality, we're actually talking about politics, okay? Is that Ukraine actually won this war.
Right.
And if you think that's a derivative
right. No,
of this
that's
messaging.
right. That's how
they
you
actually won.
Yeah,
they actually won.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's you just say this, and that's it. And that's you can absolutely get the message, and then they're going to attack him, but he's going to say, hey, I'm not doing anything to help Putin. I'm doing everything to harm Putin. I'm doing the exact opposite. Putin wanted the whole thing. He wanted the whole pie. He's only getting a fifth of the pie. That I've saved 4/5 of the pie for us. You can go on arguing about this, and the people are going to argue about this, but he's got a strong case. And once you have a strong case, then ultimately,
okay,
and you have peace, which is what's most important. The fighting, the fighting comes to an end. That's all. That's all people want to see. Not of course the warmongers in Washington and so on, but the public at large wants to see the war come to an end.
Reading my mind, exactly true. First of all, his base will go along with this in a heartbeat, okay? Right. Because he's given a reason to,
right.
Okay?
Right.
Ukraine won. Right. Why do we have to keep the war going on?
Right.
All right.
Right.
And it might, done skillfully, which they have shown themselves to be very good at to date, is get some of those Senate Republicans in line,
Right.
okay, as well.
Right.
Okay. No, Russia hasn't won. Ukraine won.
That's right.
Well, actually, Russia lost.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's going to be the argument. And then, what are they going to say? We've got to, oh, I want to keep the war going. Oh, we got to keep the war going. Hey, but if we keep the war going, we're going to lose the whole of Ukraine. Putin was going to take the whole thing. So we're saving by ending the war. We're saving Ukraine. I think it's an argument that's going to win. It's a winning argument, and I think Trump now has hit upon a formula with which he can just, finally, essentially cut the Gordian knot, which he up until now hadn't been able to by, trying to keep one side happy and then trying to keep the other and continue going backwards and forwards, which wasn't getting him anywhere. But he now has an argument that he can present that could, essentially be the basis for bringing this to some kind of an agreement. And what's important is you can see from this interview, he keeps repeating the point. So he's obviously realized that, hey, this. It's not just, randomly he threw this out. He kept going back to it, over and over and over again, as if he knows that this is the point that he wants emphasized.
And all of his buffoonish and clownish characters that he's involved in this, too many cooks spoil the broth, everybody. Why don't you reassign these people and talk to the Europeans? Look, this is a win.
Right.
We're a win. This is a win.
Right.
We wouldn't want to have the transatlantic relationship so damaged now. Now, would we? Now, we could all get on the same page here on this one.
Right. Right.
Okay. No, there's a lot of spin-offs from all of
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think so.
I can remember at one point Trump was saying that he destroyed the caliphate. He destroyed ISIS in Syria. Remember those days? Well, the U.S. didn't do it. Donald Trump didn't do it. It was the Russians that did it with about 25 planes and 6 weeks of bombing. And they pretty much, in short order, ended that. Trump took credit for it. You know what, George? I could care less if he takes credit for it or not. Okay. And I feel that way now. I'm not so prideful. I want the conflict to come to an end. I want the killing to come to an end.
Right.
If Trump wants to take credit for it, no problem. I got no problem with that whatsoever.
Right. Right. No, I think so. I think so, and I think that's it. So, ultimately, who cares who takes the credit for it if it comes to an end? Because the alternative, essentially, if you're going to go down and continue with this present policy of, one day, you're trying to keep Russia happy, then the next day you're trying to keep Ukraine happy, is you're not going to get anywhere. And this process wasn't really getting anywhere.
Well, I mean, we have 100 days of that.
Right, exactly. But now he's sort of hit upon a formula that could succeed. So he said that, well, without me, if I hadn't won this election, Russia would have taken the whole of Ukraine. And so he's saying, hey, now I've done this. And as you said, Ukraine has won this war. We should be celebrating. Ukraine has won this war.
Well, I said well over a year ago, talking about narrative management, because that's what the political West has done the entire time. It's all narrative management.
Right.
And I remember saying very clearly, and obviously facetiously, is that, well, the Russians didn't make it to Paris. They lost.
Right.
Okay. And so Trump, again, by accident or by design, has come across this. Bravo.
Right.
Bravo. Well, what we want is the end of the conflict.
Right.
We'll let the punditry and the ideologues talk about winners and losers.
Right.
I don't really care. It's not. And then there'll be the realization that security failed in Europe. That's why this conflict happened. It's not this party or that party, this individual, that individual. Is it the entire architect? This is moving further on for thinking people.
Right.
I'm not talking about politicians and the media. That will have to be addressed. But what's most important is that the conflict comes to an end.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
All right. Donald Trump, you keep surprising us, okay? and it's only been 100 days. I don't know, George, if I can take 4 years of this.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're gonna discuss on Friday something about Donald Trump and the fight that he's having to enact his agenda, and particularly the fight taking place in the courts. So that's going to be up for discussion on Friday. So that's something
Okay.
to look
Oh,
forward
so
to.
just as a kind of a sneak preview, is everyone expecting me to say that that judge that was arrested for harboring um, uh, a, fu- um,
A
a
fugitive.
defendant, let's be as clear as possible, a defendant in a case,
Right.
that woman should have been arrested and she should be prosecuted.
That's right.
Okay. But there's a lot of other things going on at the same time.
Right.
I'm a due process guy, and George and I are going to duke it out.
Right. Right.
We're going to
Exactly.
duke it out on Friday.
That's right.
Get ready.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. We're gonna. That's that because that goes to the heart of it. It's like due process, or who's entitled to what kind of due process, and that's
Or how did we get into this mess in the first place? Okay. And I think that's how we have to start the conversation.
right.
Is anyone surprised we are where we are right now? You shouldn't be. You shouldn't be.
Right.
This was a catastrophe in slow motion that anyone with their, I have one eye open, but anyone with two eyes open could see happening.
Right.
Okay. This is an inevitable outcome of just god awful policy on both sides of the aisle. Okay. I'm not going to spill any more beans here.
Right.
All right, everybody. This is the Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. As George said, Friday we
Right.
reconvene. But in the meantime, George could go solo.
Solo.
And
Yep. 3 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. Please join me. Come with comments, criticisms, ideas, suggestions, opinions. Everything is welcome. And now the man of the hour who is saying, I can't take this anymore. There's got to be something going on with the tip jar. Otherwise, my patience is running very thin. As Marco Rubio would say, we're just going to walk away. He's going to say, I've got other priorities. That's it. I'm just losing interest in the tip jar. So we don't want Buddy to walk away. So if you have a few bob in your pocket, a few bob, somewhere lying under the cushions, behind the sofa, into the tip jar, the whole thing into the tip jar, because the last thing we want is Buddy going away. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.